Welcome back to All Things Perceptual. I'm here with Ryan McMahon, author of the book Tide and the Krenog and the Sun King. Welcome back, Ryan.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
All right, well, I'd like to ask you about a character in your book Sun King. One of the most interesting parts of the book for me is when you interface with the character that you call Thought. And it seems like he meets you in like a lucid dreaming state. He sort of dumps information on you, and I'm wondering, how did you actually keep all that information or remember that for your book?
Well, Thought, it's T-H-O-T. So it is. I did this on purpose, because I was in the process of writing. So it's a play on words, right? Thought. T-H-O-T. It really does represent Thoth in the Egyptian pantheon.
Okay.
Or who would be Hermes in the ancient Nordic, and Hern is Hermes, which the Greeks adopted, and then the Romans would call him Mercury. And so I chose the term Thought because really what's happening is he is an archetype that I've had access to, which is just a deeper part of myself that I've been able to tap into and talk to if I have questions. Maybe, it'd be a little bit of a stretch to call him an inorganic being, but I kind of call him an archetype. He's an archetype of wisdom. He's an archetype of guidance and of encouragement, and also like just truth and honesty. And so, yeah, I would enter into lucid states. Some of the times I would access this guy, Thought, which I actually gave him that name. It's just a deeper part of myself. It's just a way in which I self-reflect, and I would have never named him if I weren't writing a book. So it's not like an alter ego. It's not like a split personality or anything like that. I'm fully aware that I can go into a process of meditation and seek answers within myself from an archetype of, truth and honesty, and of courage and strength, and of guidance, and it's that male patriarchal type of energy that everyone needs. But me being a young man, I needed that a lot in my life. So he really just represents that whole the whole idea of wisdom that Thoth, in Egypt, or Tehuti, also same person. He's just that archetype of wisdom, and I wanted to give him a name, and I wanted the name to represent thought. So thought actually represents your thought and your reason, the highest type of thinking that you can do. And I chose that name because it was just a play on words, and that it represents that overarching wisdom.
Yeah, I kind of got that when Thought was speaking in the book. It almost seemed like your words amplified to the next level. And I was a little bit confused when I first started reading. I was like, is he talking about Thoth? But it eventually came clear to me what was going on.
Well, so you're right. I am talking about Thoth, but, just in name, and just that archetype of Thoth. But the thing is that you're the kind of person who would go there and you'd read it and go, oh, this could be, representing Thoth. But like, I'd say 9 or 8 out of probably 80% of the people that have read my book have no idea who Thoth is. They don't know Tehuti. They don't know Hermes. They don't know these mythological archetypes, right? So to them, they're probably more inclined to think, oh, this is just thought, like you're thinking. And in both work, they're both right. They're both the same thing, really.
Right. So I'd like to congratulate you on your next upcoming book. is about Lee Plenty-Wolf and his path in the Lakota Way. Do you have a title for the book yet?
We've been changing the title a little bit, and thank you. I appreciate your kind words. The title as of now is probably just going to be called Plenty Wolf Medicine, which is reflective of his family line of medicine people. The other working title that we have is called Hechitu, which would be translated as The Way It Is in Lakota. So originally we were going to call it Hechitu, The Way It Is. And then recently he's been thinking just to call it Plenty Wolf Medicine. So one more interview. I'm working on that to try to get one more interview, very special person in there, and then we can be in the final stages of editing. And it was supposed to be done by Christmas, but this last Christmas. But I think it's really going to be probably mid-year. Hopefully, I really want it done by June. So that's my goal, to get it done by June, because in June I'll be going to an annual Lakota Sundance ceremony, and I really want to bring it to the people there that want to read it and have it there for that. That's actually their new year. So their new year begins in June.
That's very cool. I'll be sure to post a link to that book in the description of this video when it comes out. And I like what Lee Plenty-Wolf has to say. I watched a couple of videos on your channel when he gave a talk, and how he talks about healing the world, or healing the planet, or I really like his message that he has to spread. So I'll be looking forward to reading that book because of those reasons. Could you tell me a little more about the Lakota Way and how it relates to your path?
Awesome. Yeah. Lee Plenty-Wolf is a very special man. His son Charlie was just here this weekend, so I got to hang out with him and his wife, Charlie and Misty. So hello to Charlie and Misty. Thanks for coming out. But Lee is a special man. He has devoted his life. Basically, it would be like the equivalent of a monk in, say, a Hindu or Tibetan or Christian, or other religious sect, where someone really devotes their life to the spiritual path for themselves and to help others. And the Lakota Path is, well, first of all, I sort of have to caveat this. I'm a European. I'm an outsider. I didn't grow up being exposed to the Lakota Path, so I'm not an authority on it, and hopefully no one thinks I'm trying to be. But I am just speaking from my experience, and I've written it down. And Lee Plenty-Wolf asked me to write this book, which was surprising, and it's a great honor for me to be the person doing it. So I take it very seriously because it's a document and an heirloom, not only for Lakota people, but for the Plenty-Wolf family and for their particular style of medicine. So, but to answer your question, the Lakota Way for me is so important because it's the difference between a formal path and an energetic path. And the Lakota Path, or the Native American ceremonial path, is an energetic path. And in my experience, the formal paths really are kind of traps. They exist to keep things documented and keep things around, and to offer a place to congregate for groups of people of like mind, of like spiritual belief. But they're not really effective in doing anything except creating metaphor, creating flocks, and creating shepherds and sheep. And a lot of people are very comfortable with being, a part of the flock, and then not really holding much responsibility for doing any real spiritual work. And the Lakota Way is the opposite of that. It's an energetic path. It's completely merit based. So there's no, how do I say this? There's no shortcuts, and there's no like easy way to evolve through it. It's a path that's nature based, and it's based on merit and achievement. So you show up and you achieve, and then you gain the personal power of those achievements, or you don't. And so this is the reason why I'm so drawn to it, because in modern culture, the nuclear family and the very modernized world we live in tends to really either negate spiritual beliefs and paths and ways of living altogether. Very scientific, atheistic approach to life, very common in the nuclear world. Or it will gladly like to sell you the membership to some sort of herd or some sort of flock. And they're glad to keep you there because you're a revenue source for them and a voting base and a group of willful idiots if they ever need to put you to a task. So I'm not saying that there aren't true spiritual people in all of these formal paths. I know they exist, but the Native American path is about energy. It's about you and your connection to the spirit, and your evolution along that path is a self-induced initiation. And not everybody chooses to go as far as others. There's no pressure for people to reach the top of spiritual fortitude. But there are certain people like Lee Plennywolf and his certain people in his family and his line and his teachers that their souls are inclined to be leaders of this path, and their commitment is incredibly high, and you can't fake it. You cannot. There's no shortcuts to get there. You have to do it year after year, day after day, ceremony after ceremony, struggle after struggle to gain this, I guess you could say, power, to gain this personal power, but also just to gain this level of awareness that a true medicine person has. And a true medicine person offers a spiritual medicine, offers an emotional medicine and a mental medicine. And I think the physical medicine is way down the line, secondary or I don't know how you say it, tertiary.
Yeah, tertiary.
Tertiary, yeah. So not that they don't have their own form of physical medicine, like, power plants and herbs and foods and all that, but their medicine is really of the mind and of the spirit and of the emotions. And it's a legitimate way, it's a living philosophy, and much like the Tao, So it has its practices and it has its rituals, and they are strict, but they're also not so strict that they won't evolve. Every medicine person will have they have a little bit of a different variant on how they will do their medicine, even if they were taught in some specific way. If it's effective, if the spirit and power comes through them and actually helps others heal, or helps the world heal, or the earth heal, then it's medicine. It is what it is. And I just feel really fortunate to have access to it and to participate in it, because I think that a lot of people in my modern world, the modern world I live in, my immediate culture and little town I live in, I think that we're all needing some sort of merit-based or heart-based energetic path, and a lot of people are reaching out for it, and they don't know where to get it, and it's not accessible to them because modern culture really just doesn't put it up as a high priority. So yeah.
Right. I myself have always been interested in doing a sweat lodge and finding out what that experience is like. I had a chance to do one about a year ago, but I would have had to have joined a peyote church. And it might have been all good. It seemed like they had good intentions, but I don't know, maybe it was the word church that threw me off. So I didn't actually take that chance to do that. You said that I forget if you wrote in a book or if you said in one of your interviews that you are starting to experience ritual in dancing, and you're the fireman right now. What is that all about?
Yeah. So, you can't, there's certain things you can't talk about in ceremony. So I'll have to be careful as to what I say and what I don't say to
Gotcha.
respect the tradition. But yeah, it's amazing. It's a very, very powerful thing to make a location sacred. And a lot of people maybe don't understand that. And I didn't understand that until I participated in it. And I realized, wow, this was just a piece of land last week with nothing on it but trees and grass. And now it actually is a vortex for spiritual change. And it's like, how did that happen? Well, all these people put their heart and their mind together and in their intent, and they built this sacred circle. And they built it with their hands. And I help do that from time to time. They build the sweat lodge. They harvest a sacred tree, which is a representative of the tree of life. And we build a sacred circle. And only certain people are allowed in that circle because they've committed their bodies, minds, and souls to such a high level of prayer that other people are not allowed in that circle because they're not as pure at that time. And it's nothing to do with like these people are better than you. It's that they decided to commit to something that is so noble that they have a sacred place to do their work. And so that's what the circle is about, and the tree within the middle of it. And I'm speaking of a Sundance ceremony right now, but there's 7, at least with the Lakota, there's 7 main ceremonies that they do, and I haven't participated in all of them. Maybe I've participated in about half. But the Inipi ceremony, which is what we would call a sweat lodge, is the most fundamental. The Inipi ceremony is a purification ceremony that is done in a lodge, a sweat that you sweat in, that's hand built in a sacred way, very specific sacred way, attuned to specific directions for specific styles of medicine, for specific spirits to come in, for specific types of healing. And each time they have those specifics to them. They're different. It's the first and essential way to purify yourself before you go do any prayer. So it's like kind of like taking a shower. It's like you clean your body when you take a shower, and then you feel renewed and refreshed to go and do something else important. And so for them, the Inipi ceremony is a way to purify your spirit before you go and do something in a sacred way or in a sacred place. And the whole sweat lodge ceremony, Inipi ceremony, is a representation of the female womb. So it's a place built into the earth where you actually do go in there and you feel like you are in a womb when you're in there. And when you come out, you do feel renewed or rebirthed. So it's a rebirthing process. And in my opinion, it's like a forced meditation. It's very intense. And for people that don't know what meditation is like, or have never like tapped into a meditation, if you were to go into a properly run Inipi ceremony, you would just be forced into a meditative state by the elements of nature. And the Lakota and the Native Americans have so wisely figured out ways in which to use the earth, stones and water and fire, the elements of the earth and sacred plants. They've learned how to use all those elements in a way, in a medicinal way, that puts you into a womb-like or embryonic-like state So I'll also call that womb-like state an embryonic-like state, because as a child, when you're in the womb, you have no real worries, right? You don't even really feel gravity. You're floating, weightless. You're in a state of basically a state of like a suspended animation, or you could maybe, I don't want to call it bliss, because there is trauma that can happen there. You know, you can experience stress when you're in the womb. But overall, the reason why you're in this state of suspended animation, you're held in the dark. It's a place for you to grow. It's a place for you to be completely protected and grow and transform and change. And so when you come out of the female womb, you're in a state of struggle immediately. The whole process is a state of struggle, just being born. And there's trauma from the moment that you feel contractions, or you get contracted out of there. And then there's trauma for the rest of your life. So the Lakota people have built a sacred womb where we can go in and talk to each other and talk to spirit and pray without judgment in a very sacred way, where everything that is, said or sung in there is protected by spirit. And it's a place for you to be really with your own self, with your own spirit, and talk to the Creator, talk to God, ask for help or guidance if you need help, or if you don't need help, to offer help and guidance and encouragement and love to other people in that circle that may need it. And then, of course, you carry that experience with you when you're just going about, you're in the world. You're aware of what it feels like to be in a sacred space, and it's a part of you. And I think this is really one of the really strong contributing factors that the Lakota people have graciously opened their hearts to other people, is they have not lost touch with what our ancestral wisdom was or is. And so they are able to just tap into the sacred part of themselves much easier than, say, well, it's hard to say, than an average person. I would just say they're able to tap in much easier than a person who's habitually like living the rat race type of lifestyle, because their minds, the rat race is keeping you on the race, keeping you on the hamster wheel. You got to grind it out and expend your energy and focus on more menial tasks and more day-to-day type stuff and more material type stuff. And it's not that all those things are bad, but they need to be balanced with your true nature, which is a spiritual nature. I think, well, for me, I know that my nature is a spiritual nature, and I look at all other human beings as spiritual beings as well. We're all just on different levels of awareness of that. And so really it's an energetic path, and the Lakota people have held tradition and held this path together, and have not lost touch with it. And I admire them for that, and I thank them for that. And I feel very fortunate to be a part of it. And then on top of that, to really write about it. And this book, my third book, is really not, there's not a lot of words that are my own in there. It's there, I have my commentary in there, like here and there, but really it's Lee's story. And a lot of the words are coming directly from his mouth. It's what he wants to put in the book and what he wants to say for the future generations, so that this tradition doesn't fall away, and that it stays alive. Because, there's the Native American people were down to very, very small numbers just a couple hundred years ago, and they're repopulating themselves, and most of them are unaware of their own traditions. And so a lot of Native people are they're just like what I'm talking about. They're living a rat race, or they live in a way in which they don't have access to spirit. It could be right down the road from them, and they just don't know it's there. They don't have a way to sit down and talk to God or, you know, to be taught those sacred ways. And I would also say that we carry that sacred part of ourselves with us all the time, that divine part of ourselves. So we actually don't need a system to access it, but the systems are extremely helpful, because if you forget your own, your own true nature, then you forget to go in there and to tap in and to sit and listen to that still small voice, or to sit in meditation, or just to pray, and I'll sort of segue here back to language. Prayer is powerful language, and song in harmonic tones is a way to program your subconscious mind so that it will feed you all the time. In what you put in there is what you're going to get out of there. So, again, Ayn Rand, the great female philosopher, and then Nathaniel Branden, who writes a lot on the power of self-esteem, they talk about this term psycho-epistemology, and they basically say that like self-talk or self-programming is psycho-epistemology. It's a way in which you have access to your own mind, and you have influence over your own mind. And most people don't realize that you're constantly in this loop every day, all the time. Every time you speak to yourself, you're creating a psycho-epistemology that is upholding your reality. And what most people don't realize is that you either work on that consciously and make it as beautiful and as balanced and as strong as you can, like, because you put forth the energy each day to do that, or you don't. And if you don't do that, it's working on you anyway. So all the stuff that you see, like every time you see the word ruination, or every time you see or hear some really dramatic negative talk, or some victimhood mentality talk, or you watch the news and it's all very negative, all that stuff is going into your mind on some level, and it will get into your subconscious, or your deep reservoir, and you're going to be creating a psycho-epistemology whether you like it or not. And so once you realize this, then you kind of have no choice but, if you care about yourself, to make your own psycho-epistemology. Speak good to yourself, and do things in a good way, and really watch yourself talk and change it. And I think this is a huge part of psychology and psychoanalysis, and it really goes back to prayer, because that's what prayer really is a way in which you can talk to the part of yourself that's creative and that co-creates and works with reality. So yeah.
So for people who aren't familiar with the term epistemology, it's my understanding that epistemology is taking away what is not real so you can understand what is real or there. Is that pretty much a breakdown?
Yeah, I mean, that is a good way to say it. That's not the way that I would say it, but it's definitely not incorrect. The way that I understand epistemology as a term, it's one of the three branches of philosophy. So philosophy in general, which is philo is love, and Sophie is wisdom.
Right.
The love of wisdom is philosophy. So there's three main branches of the love of wisdom. I should know all these: epistemology, metaphysics, and what's the other one? Aesthetics, or beauty. So the epistemology is probably the most fundamental part of philosophy, because really what it is it's very scientific in its method. Epistemology is the process in which we verify as true what we think we know. So it's this process of saying, if I bring you a fact, say, hey, this is a fact, you might agree with it and go, yeah, okay, I can take that as a fact. And then we find out 5 years later that we were both wrong. And it's like, well, was it true? Well, it was partially true. It was true until we learned where it was, sort of lacking. And now we know something that's even more true, or a greater truth. And so now we call that greater truth a fact, right? And so the process of epistemology is taking things that we think are true or facts and really breaking them down and going, how can we know? Like, how can we absolutely, positively know that this is true? And it's a very frustrating part for most people, unless you really love wisdom, unless you're a really deep philosopher. Most people will avoid this subject altogether, because as soon as they find something that they think is a fact and they're stoked, they're happy, like, oh, I know for a fact that this is real. I can live my life as if this is real. They might find out sooner or later that it's not real. It's only partially real, or there's something even more real than that, and they have to let go of that, of what they think they knew. So epistemology is a dance of some sorts. And so psycho-epistemology is the mind. It's taking the mind and building and using the mind on what you know to be true. Okay? So that process makes you stronger and builds self-esteem. However, as time goes on, you might find that even though you built your foundation on these things that you knew to be true, you might find now you have to break them down and replace them with something that's even more fundamentally true. A new epistemology, or let's say a greater epistemology. And that whole process is called psycho-epistemology. And one of the most important things about it is that there's a direct link to cognition. Your psycho-epistemology is directly linked to your ability to cognize, to your cognition. And this again comes out of Nathaniel Branden's book, The 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem. And he said, well, you'll notice that people that have a high self-esteem also have a very high ability to cognize. And so the reason why is because they're able to vet and test their thinking and reasoning process at a deeper level than people that have a lower self-esteem. Because part of the reason why you have a low self-esteem is because you have a mild state of anxiety about the world. You don't really know, you don't really feel strong and safe and protected because the world is dynamic. It's changing moment by moment, and life is a struggle. So people get into that state of anxiety, and their self-esteem goes down because they're worried all the time about where their next meal is going to come from or how they're going to navigate the world. And so their ability to cognize goes down because they're in a state of fear or a state of anxiety, a mild state of fear or anxiety. And so you don't think as clear as if you were in a state of peace, a state of bliss, a state of confidence, or a state of healthy self-esteem. So I know it's kind of a segue, but psycho-epistemology is incredibly important. And this goes back to our speech. This is why our speech is important. This is why prayer is important. This is why making time for yourself is important. This is why a living philosophy is important. And this is why really discerning what your culture tells you, your society, your culture tells you is important, because like Nietzsche so famously said, society is the barometer of mediocrity. And what he's saying is that the group or the herd or the flock doesn't cognize very well. Because when you're in a group, you get to relax and depend on the person next to you for your answers. And if everybody in the group is looking to their left or looking to their right and going, hey, I'll just do what you do because you seem to know what's going on. If everybody in the group's doing that, no one's really thinking. No one's really reasoning. No one's really cognizing. And so society and culture, are important because they have cohesiveness for the group, but they're also important to be transcended or transformed or changed. And that's what an individual is designed to do. As someone who thinks freely, someone who cognizes for themselves and works on that, someone who creates, I'll say it like this, someone who creates their own psycho-epistemology, someone with high self-esteem, someone who's a natural leader, someone who is willing to embrace their fear or willing to face the struggles of life with a higher character, with a noble character, you know. And those people become medicine people, whether they realize it or not. You know, you could just be an intellectual medicine person because you're bringing clarity to the herd. And you might not even know that you're really healing people. That it doesn't matter if you like seek out to heal people. What matters is that people get healed. And so I'll kind of, I guess I'll end there with that.
Yeah, I appreciate the thoughts on that and the breakdown of epistemology. I myself feel like when I get caught in the rat race, I definitely don't feel right or good. And so I have to do something. And that's part of why I started my YouTube channel, was just to get back into my true path. And a lot of people have left positive comments, believe it or not, on YouTube.
Oh yeah.
A lot of people have thanked me for posting the videos and said how much it's changed them. And, you know, that's changed me in a way I never thought I would affect people. I've always been on the path for myself, but when I started my YouTube channel, suddenly I've got people kind of listening to me and looking up to me in a way. It's kind of an interesting experience. I know you have a YouTube channel as well. What does that mean to you?
Well, first of all, I thank you for your YouTube channel. I really like it. Although partially because you and I deal with the same content a lot, so we have of like mind. You know, we're kindred spirits in that sense. Kin meaning the root word of kind. You know, we're of the same kind, or we're kind to each other because we share some of the same values and beliefs. But your channel is beautiful and wonderful, and I think it's really well done, and it provides a great platform for people to self-reflect. And I think that's what the internet. Well, I think the greatest tool for the internet is this tool for potential self-reflection. Although very few people use it for that, you know, it's a technology that I think is easily misused. But speaking to your point, I have read some of your comments on there, and I think they're like overwhelmingly positive and overwhelmingly good, and you've done a good thing there and should continue it. And I'm happy to be a part of it, so I appreciate that. And in a sense, my channel is very similar, but my channel, at least my intention when I built my channel, really was a way to organize my thoughts so that I could write books. Because I would do research and I would get in these really deep rabbit holes of thought, and I would find a bit of knowledge that was important to me, and I go, oh, this is a pearl of wisdom for me, just me personally. I don't know if it's a pearl of wisdom for other people, but for me, this is really important. And so I would go, oh, I could just leave it. I could just leave it in this book and highlight it with a marker, and then open up the page when I need it and use the book as a reference. And then I realized I never do that. Hardly ever do I ever do that. I don't really work that way. And so I went, if I do that, I will forget that I did that, or I won't know where this reference point is. I won't remember why I referenced it or why I thought it was important when I thought it was important. And so I thought, you know, I'm going to make this into a video where I can sort of talk to myself, make it so I can know why it's important to me. I'll put it on a video and write it down or draw it out or just talk it out. And then I'll just go back and re-listen to my own audio and my own video and my own visuals, and I'll know exactly what I meant to to keep there, to hold there. And so I did that a lot. I went back and wrote about half of my second book about half of it was all based on video notes. And I could go back and through these concepts and go, oh yeah, that's what I meant, when I was talking about harmonics of the solar system. Because it's a tough thing when you're a syncretic thinker or someone who tends to think holistically. You tend to link universals together, or you tend to link you tend to link all these different subjects together that actually are interrelated, but could seem so far apart. Like mathematics is linked to architecture if you're building a house, but so is light and sound, because you walk through a house and you sound different in this room than you do in the hallway. And that room looks different when the sun hits that color wall than it does with that color wall. And so what I'm trying to say is, when you think in an interconnected way, or a holistic way, or a syncretic way, you're not really an expert in anything. It's like you really are like a jack of many trades. And when someone were to challenge you and go, hey, what do you think of vortex mathematics? It's like, well, I know what vortex mathematics is, but if I haven't been studying it in the last year, I'm going to have a hard time articulating my thoughts about it, even though I know what it is, and even if I understand it. And so, for someone who studies math and only math, they can always talk about it at any time, anywhere, any place, and they'll always have the ability to articulate it. But for someone who's a very holistic or syncretic thinker, they have to draw on this deep reservoir of memory bank to try to pull out the knowledge that they quote unquote have. So anyway, my YouTube channel is sort of like a bank of knowledge for myself. And it just so happened, and I'm really happy about it, that other people benefited from it, or benefit from it. Other people go, man, I like this too. And also it's been, I definitely get some critique out there for sure. And I welcome that. I don't mind that at all, because I've learned a lot of new things from people who have critiqued my work and go, hey, have you thought about it in this way, or have you looked deeper than that and read this person or that person? And so I welcome the challenges of doing that. And then the other thing about YouTube and social media, I'm very leery of most social media. I'm not on a lot of things, but probably the most important thing outside of being able to write a book with all this stuff, the most important thing is actually connecting with people like you. I have been fortunate to interview or be interviewed by some really, really brilliant people. And for someone who likes to learn, which I do, I think that it's just, you just can't put a price on that, because knowledge is a very powerful thing, and sorting through all the half-truths is a really difficult thing to do, and it can be very convoluted, and it's a very daunting task. And I feel like my YouTube channel has brought me in contact not with like tons of smart people, but with just a handful of brilliant people. And I am like so happy to have friends in the, well, I guess I call it the truth movement, right? That's like this new term, this people that seeking the truth. I have a few friends out there that I could, if I have a real hard question, I can call them up and ask them, and I know that they're going to be truthful and honest with me, and they're going to give me their best shot at it, and that they're at least as far along the path as I am, if not further. And so I like to keep keep that, like those good human beings in my social circle, even if it is at a distance.
I feel very fortunate that our paths have crossed. The way I found your channel was actually through someone commenting on my YouTube channel saying that you had the Encounters with the Nagual series. And when I went to check that out, I said, hey, this is my kind of stuff, right? I had never read Encounters with the Nagual. And now I'm on my way to go pouring through your video library of 200 videos.
Yeah.
You're at 199 right at this moment of today, but soon you'll be at 200. I congratulate you on that. But it's going to be quite a bit of watching to get through all those videos. Also, the one reason I did make my YouTube channel is to scratch my own itch. There's one segment I have called Spiritual Warrior, where I go through some of the Carlos Castaneda books, and I would highlight just the parts where Don Juan talks about how a warrior should act or what a warrior should do. And so what I did is I took those parts and just put them into a video. And so now I can go back anytime if I want to rebuff myself on what a warrior should be doing. And just listen to those videos myself, and a lot of other people have come to appreciate that as well.
Oh yeah, I found, it's funny, I found your channel before you and I were connected. I'd watched that series. I'd watched a couple of videos on that series. Definitely the video you're speaking of. Probably I found you because I had put all these Toltec style videos up, the Encounters with the Nong-Wall and a couple other ones that deal with perception and Castaneda's work. And I think that, I would go to my own channel, and then obviously in the like suggestion box, your channel would pop up there. And so, yeah, I think that the Toltec teachings are a really amazing teaching, and that they are an energetic path. Back to that, they're an energetic path, and there's a very loose affiliation of what the Toltec is, how to access it. There's not really any Toltec churches that I'm aware of, and you kind of have to initiate yourself into the knowledge, and unless you're born into it somehow, you're sort of have access to an indigenous wisdom keeper. But it seems like books and that YouTube is the first door, the first access, into that world. And powerful world. It's really been instrumental for my way of thinking. When I study philosophy, it definitely, the energetic part weighs in a lot when I start to figure out what is being said, what's being intended, what's the meaning. The Toltec has taught me a lot about energy while thinking about philosophy. And that book, I would say, and this is just for me, the book Encounters with the Nong-Wall is almost more important to me than most of Castaneda's work. Although you can't dispense with Castaneda's work, there's nothing like it. But it's just, 13 or 14 books, and they're all, you kind of have to read at least half of them to really understand his syntax and what his message is. Whereas if you read Encounters with the Nong-Wall, it's still an incredibly dense work, but it's like you kind of get a very good summation in one book, in one volume. But I got to say that the reason why I put that series up there is because I keep re-listening to it and rereading it and getting more and more understanding each time that I do it. I even, just for this interview, I went through one video that's really important to me about that. It's called The Appointment with Dreaming in the Nong-Wall series. It's like 8-9 minutes long, and every time I listen to it, I'm reminded, or like you said, I get to rebuff my own way of thinking and living in the world. So that kind of work, that kind of book is very powerful. I'd say that it's in my top 10 like most important books I've ever read.
I appreciate that. Not only did Castaneda write about the Toltec way, but we got Ken Eaglefeather, Armando Torres, Don Miguel Ruiz, Victor Sanchez. It's really helped me to kind of solidify that that's a real thing. There's a lot of critics of Castaneda saying that he made the whole thing up and it's not true, but with all these other authors coming in writing about it, it not only does it give a different perspective on the Toltec path, but it also kind of reassures me that it's a valid path.
Yeah, I would agree. I've read all those. I think Ken Eaglefeather on the Toltec Path, that one was really impactful for me, and I read another one of his. And Victor Sanchez's was great because it was also in more plain language. It was easier to understand. And yeah, it's done the same for me. It's like solidified it as a real path, a real way, or a real living philosophy.
Yeah, I liked Victor Sanchez's book. I forget what it's called, the Teachings of Don Carlos, because it was kind of like a workbook. You would read it and he would say, okay, now go out and do this. And so that's what I loved about it. Once I got into the action of just doing what Don Juan had Carlos doing, that's when I opened up and pretty much spiritually metamorphosized. You can't just read and intellectualize about these things. You have to go out and do them. And I've tried all the techniques, and it kind of is a way of awakening your energy body, or your dreaming self, as some people would call it.
Yes.
So I appreciate his works for that.
Yeah, and then I would like to speak to Don Miguel Ruiz. He's probably the most famous outside of Castaneda, at least in our era, for being a Toltec teacher, and his approach is so much more gentle. And in some ways, I when he first came out, I didn't resonate with him because he wrote for a more mainstream audience and was like much less mystical. But as I've gotten older, I realized, well, there's a lot of value in that because it's bringing this stuff to the layman, whoever wants to access it in a very digestible way. However, I will say, not too long ago, maybe about a year to 2 years ago, I read The Fifth Agreement. And The Fifth Agreement, I think, is fantastic. It's maybe, I personally, I think it's his best book. And there's a lot you can take away from it, but I resonate with it heavily because it really talks about language, again, in a real way. And real quick, I'll just kind of break down like what I took a lot from it, but one of the things I took from it and that I keep applying on a regular basis are the three main languages that humans speak. I don't know if you've heard of this, but he breaks it down into three different types of language. The first one that people speak, the most common, is called the language of gossip, and that every human being knows how to speak the language of gossip. It's also the language of drama, but even more importantly, the third way that it's called is the language of the victim. Because if you hear someone gossiping, you can be sure that they're victims, or that they see themselves as victims. And you'll notice that like a very holy person, or a very like strong, centered, healthy self-esteem type of person is like, they don't gossip. They realize somewhere along the way that like gossiping doesn't serve anyone. It doesn't serve me, and it doesn't serve the person who's not present that I'm talking bad about, and it doesn't serve the person who is present that's listening to the bad talk about someone who's not.
It's true.
So the first language that all humans, and we learn this from socialization, from our family and from our culture, is the language of gossip. And nobody needs to, every single person speaks that language. They know how to speak it. It's just totally natural. But the second language is the language of the warrior. And the language of the warrior is defined by the simple yet profound awareness that you realize that this is actually a dream. And a lot of people have a hard time with this, and they just think, this is just funny talk. The Aborigines will talk about the dream time. And of course, Carlos himself said that his greatest gift that to the world was the art of dreaming. And so it's hard for people to realize that the nature of reality when you're awake still has dreamlike quality. And when you learn how to move your assemblage point, and you learn how to willfully change your ability to perceive, you start to access this dreamlike quality that exists in everyday nature and everyday reality. And then, again, with your self-talk, you co-create or manifest things that you desire or intend, and you start to realize this is like a dream. It's like, I had this idea, I wanted to make it happen, and then you wake up one day and you put energy into that idea over and over and over again, and all of a sudden it's happened. And you're like, well, how did that happen? Did it just happen by chance? No, of course not. It happened because you dreamt it into being. You intended it with your words and your will and your intent and your power and your spirit, and you focused on it, and you put energy from within your own self, like this self-perpetuating infinite energy, and all of a sudden you've just dreamt something into being. And this kind of speaks to like civilization at large. It's like, cell phone. It's like, this is a cool thing, right? Well, it started out as an idea. It started out as a thought in someone's head. And now it's a real thing that exists in the real world. We just took it out of our minds and we dreamt it into the real world. And it's the same with all inventions and everything, computers and microphones. But we can dream all kinds of things. We can dream love. We can dream wisdom. We can dream energy. We can dream, there's really not very much limitation to what we can dream. And so my point in all this is that the warrior is the person who has woken up enough to realize that he has the power, like he does when he's asleep, to create this dream world that he can walk through walls and fly and, morph into different ideas and creatures. That's all happens when he's asleep or she's asleep. But you can also affect this world in a dreamlike way. And so the warrior's woken up to the fact that this is a dream, and then he has to take responsibility for what he's dreaming. And that comes back down to your language. So the language of the warrior oscillates between the language of gossip and victimhood, and then into the language of dreaming. And he goes back and forth. He's like, sometimes he's really strong and he stays in dreaming. And then he catches himself just, speaking in these mediocre terms and gossiping and acting as if the world happens to him, as if he's a victim. Very common in today's world, at least if you want to watch TV, it's all over the place. And the TV programs you. It programs your psycho-epistemology to be a victim. And so the warrior struggles to really pay attention and to correct his language or his speech to where he only speaks in non-gossip and in non-victimhood terms. And at that point, he really becomes a warrior on the path of knowledge. And then ideally, there's a third kind of language which Don Miguel Ruiz hits home really well at, and it's called the language of the masters. And this is just a warrior who's been on the path of knowledge so long and created such a habit of not falling into the victimhood type of speech or the gossip type of speech, remaining a warrior long enough to where it's completely second nature. It's automatic. And that's why you won't see a very wise, holy person who's really holy, who's really doing good work. They'll never speak like that. They'll never speak in terms of the victim because they are aware of their own power. And they don't want to abuse it even to themselves. So they speak in the language of the masters, and they have really mastered speech and the power of your word, the power of your logos. And that's why the things they manifest so strongly and so much more easily. Like they're able to co-create reality better than the average person because they really have worked on it. So that's one of the things that I took from Don Miguel Ruiz's The Fifth Agreement is those three types of language. And how powerful they are. I even did, so somewhere on my channel, I highlighted that. I did a talk, I did a condensed version called The Power of Word and Symbol. And you can actually, that's actually on, you can buy that in a CD form. You can buy it on Amazon. And it goes through some of these things. And then I also just did a public talk about it where I break down language in general. And, you know, it's much longer. It's like a 2-hour talk. But the CD or audio file is, I think it's like 50 minutes. So it's like not too long to bog you down.
Awesome. Well, I'll be looking out for that CD. Is that available on Amazon?
It is.
Okay.
Yep.
Well,
it's available on Amazon.
I appreciate
it's called
you.
It's called So to Speak: The Power of Word and Symbol.
Okay. I'll probably put a link to that in the comments section, or no, the info section of the video. Unfortunately, our second hour has gone by so quickly.
Yeah, fast, huh?
Time flies when you're having a good time. Thanks for speaking about the Fifth Agreement and Intent. That book's been on my wish list for a while now, so I guess I'll have to bump it up and get to it.
Absolutely.
Well, I got a jet, so until next time, I appreciate you for coming on my show, and I appreciate everybody for watching. Thanks a lot. See you next time.
Thank you so much, Hank. I appreciate it, and let's do it again in the future.
Right on.